Bullet Drive. Live from Washington on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
It's 24 minutes past 4 here on LBC. We are in Washington. We'll be talking a lot about the US presidential election after 5. We'll also have more on this devastating Italian avalanche later this hour. And Theo Ushwood, our political editor, will be joining us to tell us why Jeremy Corbyn is instructing his MPs to vote for triggering Article 50. But let's go straight to your calls on the fact that British media organisations have been forced to make a string of corrections and retractions over recent months relating to coverage of Muslims. Do you think there is a media agenda to demonise Muslims, or do you think it's just sort of inaccurate reporting by people maybe who should know better? It's not deliberate, but they've just sort of missed some of the point, or some of the news agency reports need to be questioned a little bit more than they are. Abbas is in Redbridge. Hello, Abbas.
Hi there, good afternoon, Ian. Thanks for getting me on. I think the question here is that it's a rather unpalatable a concept to imagine that people would deliberately lie or mislead people. But at times I must say, Ian, that it really does get to a stage where you're left rather bewildered as to how such a monumental mistake could have been made unless it was deliberate. I don't believe that our media here are in somehow colluding with one another to present these mistruths. And I believe that a lot of it is just lazy, popularist type of journalism. But I think at times it's so blatant, I think, and it's so, so obvious that I think it's wrong to just assume that it's just a mistake. There was a story, I'm not going to name the paper, but a few years back it was about a Muslim stops cooking pork at cafe. That was the headline. Immediately you jump to the conclusion that here we go again. Muslims are, infringing upon our rights to be as we want to be and as how we want to live and with our freedoms, etc., and they're stopping us from having pork. But in fact, it was a Muslim cafe owner who was cooking the pork, and it was a non-Muslim neighbour who complained to the council because he didn't have a hot food licence that the fumes were actually causing respiratory, problems to her son who was asthmatic. But if you looked at the headline, it was clearly very, very misleading. And I believe that the media need to take responsibility because, as your caller previously alluded to, these things do indeed have an effect on how we look at one another, how we judge one another. A clever person may actually read the story and analyze it for what it is. But there are obviously a lot of people out there who would just look at that headline and it would just reinforce their predispositions to believe that these Muslims are just troublemakers and they're just here to sort of take over.
I think there's also, this is one I was interested in, the Spanish supermarket report where the Sun had the headline, "Supermarket terror, gunman screaming, Allahu Akbar, opens fire, ... Now, I doubt whether that came from a Sun reporter in Spain. I suspect it came from a Spanish news agency. And therefore, if I'm right, you have a UK reporter who's writing up the story from a Spanish news agency. Well, is he going to check whether the news agency was 100% correct? You like to trust news agencies, but they get things wrong sometimes too. But clearly nothing was done to check that. Maybe because it played into a little bit of a pre-existing narrative. Who knows? Abbas, stay on the line. I want to bring in Seamus in Sutton, see what he has to say. I think you're going to probably disagree with Abbas, Seamus.
Well, I'm a bit disappointed at this rhetoric because it seems as if we now live in a country where we have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people policing the airwaves are waiting to be offended. And it's as if we cannot comment on or report or discuss anything that in any way or form might be relative, critical at all to Muslim. And I don't think that's appropriate or fair. Now, you do get the rogue reporters and the rogue newspapers who have a narrative and who have an agenda. But what does Abbas want us to do? Basically run every particular article through him to sign off, and yet you can report that, carry on.
Abbas?
Hi there. Sorry, I didn't catch your name. What was your name?
Seamus.
Seamus. Hi, Seamus. No, Seamus, that's clearly not what I'm asking, Seamus. But what I am saying, Seamus, is this. that when we live in a society where these type of mistruths or untruths or exaggerations have a direct effect on how people treat one another, then we need to be more responsible as to how we present those stories. And we need to make sure. I've got no problem when people say to me that there are some Muslims out there who are crazy, they're extremists, they're murderers, and they're fanatics, and they've taken their religion to such extremes that they're horrible and indecent people. You know what, Seamus? Most of us Muslims agree with those sentiments as well. But, you know, if you demonize an entire people, Seamus, the problem that you have is that it then affects people like myself, my wife, my children, who are then scared to go out or scared to interact because of the abuse possibly that they're getting. Now, luckily in London, we don't get that because people generally are a lot more accommodating here. But there are fringes of society within other areas where you do hear reports of people who find these type of mistruths as a fanning of the flames of hatred, and they go out and they act upon those things. It's not about taking offense. It's about just honesty and an openness to be able to say, well, look, you know, you can present a story, but then I should have the right to at least tell you if that story is inaccurate or untrue. Surely that's fair,
Interestingly, Kay has texted in to say, Ian, I'm a Sikh, and I can tell you that racism towards Sikhs has been recorded as Islamophobia by certain police authorities. Can you fathom that? No, I can't. Well, Seamus, Abbas, thank you very much indeed. We'll come back to more of your calls in a moment. 0345 6060 97.